So it's time to start with our first discussion. It's our first panel in which we will address the current state of water resources, the blue economy, and the contaminants in the water that are not currently regulated. Panelists will offer insights from the perspective of global climate change, industry, and communities. Please welcome to the stage the panelists, Mr. Alistair Boxall, Professor of Environmental Science at the University of York's Environment and Geography Department in the United Kingdom. Mr. Uroš Weigl, State Secretary at the Slovenian Ministry of the Environment, Climate and Energy. Mr. Martin Grembo, former Bavarian Water Director from Germany. Mr. Johan Overboom, the Kingdom of the Netherlands Ambassador to Slovenia. Mr. Anthony Agota, Ambassador at Large and Special Envoy for Climate and Environment at the European External Action Service. And we have also two panelists attending online. Welcome to Mrs. Dagmar Bernhard Kaljarikova, International Relations Officer at the European Commission, Directorate General for Environment from Belgium, and Mr. Ladislav Feigl, Director of the Water Protection Department at the Czech Ministry of Environment. We are honored to welcome Mr. Aleš Musar again to the stage to moderate this panel.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are running a little bit behind schedule and we'll try to be efficient to catch up a little bit. So, the title of this panel is long and we'll shorten it to Challenges and Policies. Is that okay with you? Because this is what we can actually talk about. Now, I have good news and bad news for the young generation. The bad news is the climate change is here. It's not just some future theory. We've had floods, we've had all sorts of events. We've had other events which were raising awareness about the sources of clean water, and nothing worse as well as 500 cases of diarrhea in the center of Ljubljana, I can assure you. The good news here is that that's my generation, and all our generations are already forced to do something about that. But let's see about what first. Professor Boxall, the microphone is somewhere there, I suppose.
And I think I have some slides.
You do have slides?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, yeah.
Is that working? Yeah.
We will be speaking about the contaminants in the water.
I'll be talking about contaminants in the water, and I'll also make a link to climate change. So I think we have some slides. As an academic, I can't talk without slides. So
I hope that as academic you can talk shorter than 45 minutes.
Yeah, and here we go. Okay, so what I'm going to talk about is the mixture of chemicals, species, and global megatrends. So we can have the next slide, please. Oh, I've got the... So there we go.
Use this one.
Okay, brilliant. Okay, so we as society use a lot of chemicals. Globally, in 2020, it was estimated that there were 350,000 chemicals and chemical mixtures registered around the world. As you came here today, you probably came in a car. Your car tyre will contain over 400 chemicals. Your household will contain 4,000 chemicals. We have 2,000 pharmaceuticals approved for use in Europe. 600 veterinary medicines, about 500 pesticides. So we use a lot of substances, and it's inevitable that they'll get into the environment. But the way we assess and manage chemicals, I would argue, is not really fit for purpose. So Europe, we focus on 45 chemicals. And we've done some work recently in Yorkshire. So Yorkshire is where I come from. In England. So Yorkshire is what's thought to be the God's country in the UK. So, but Yorkshire's a beautiful place, and it has beautiful rivers. But those rivers are under threat from chemicals. And we've been doing some work over the past year where we've been continuously monitoring Yorkshire's rivers. We've been using some of the state-of-the-art monitoring techniques. And it might surprise you that across Yorkshire's rivers, we're detecting 32,000 different chemicals in that water. We're regulating 45. Now, that's a concern because this complex mixture is probably not doing much good for the ecology. So I apologise for this detailed slide, but this detailed slide has got a food web on it. So it's a really simple food web. At the bottom of the food web, you've got the algae, which are the primary producers. They're being fed on by the invertebrates, and then you've got the fish feeding on the invertebrates. And if you look at the types of things we measure, we find things that affect photosynthesis of algae, the growth of algae. We have things that affect the behaviour of invertebrates, the growth of invertebrates, the morphology of invertebrates, and then things that affect things like reproduction of fish, how the fish interact with each other, so the social interactions of male and female fish, how they feed. Some chemicals cause intersex, so they give male fish female characteristics, and some other chemicals affect the cells of the fish. And if you think about that mixture in the rivers, all of that's happening at once to these different organisms. We're just looking at 45 substances, and we're not looking at those types of endpoints in the way that we assess the impacts of chemicals. And to make things even more complicated and scary, all of this is changing with global megatrends. So we've heard this morning about climate change, but there's other things happening globally as well. So we've got urbanization, we've got migration, we've got demographic change. So in the UK, we've got an aging population. And all of those factors taken together are going to affect the types of chemicals that we use. So if we take demographic change, as people get older, they're probably going to be taking many more pharmaceuticals. So I think most people in the room probably don't take many medicines, but once you're in your 80s, you're probably taking 10 to 20 medicines a day. Climate change is going to affect the sensitivity of species. It's going to affect the flows of rivers, the dilution of chemicals. And taking all of that together then, what I would say is that the risk of chemicals in the future could be very different from today. And if we're not careful, it could be a lot worse than today. So I think we need to, be much more scientific in the way that we assess chemical risks to the environment. I think we need to start using some of the more sort of modern scientific approaches that we have available. And I think we need to be much more forward-looking. We need to think to the future. And we mustn't, and I think this sort of resonates with some of the things we've heard already, we mustn't just consider water quality on its own. It's a complex part of the whole system. We need to consider climate, urbanization, migration, demographics, and water quality and quantity together. So I'll stop there.
Thank you. I will ask, though, a question. We are regulating a small number of chemicals, and there's a huge number of chemicals which may be present. If we increase the number of chemicals tenfold, did we do anything?
If we increase the number
of chemicals we are following,
how do we keep up with it? So I think we need to be much more proactive and much more adaptive. So I think regulation in Europe is quite slow, and in the UK it's even slower. But
we have policymakers around here. We'll ask them about that.
So I think we need to be much more reactive. So we're continuously, I think, as new chemicals come on, we're assessing them better, we're assessing them more quickly, and we're sort of embedding them into monitoring and management more quickly and more.
Yeah. Do you have any other approach than monitoring individual chemicals? With this number of possible chemicals, it's frankly impossible.
But I think, that's true. But I think some of the new technological approaches that we've got, so some of the monitoring approaches are getting extremely sophisticated. When I'd started, when I was at the age of our young colleague earlier, we could maybe monitor tens of substances. We can now get a water sample, inject it on an instrument, and we can find tens of thousands of substances.
Yeah, that would be another question. I have some data about trifluoroacetic acids being detected here and there in many places, too many places, in fact, but at the levels of nanograms per liter, and we were unable to analyze that 10, 20 years ago. Do we have too good analytical methods?
It is a challenge. So I think as the analytical methods get better and better, we detect more and more. We get lower and lower. What we need to be doing is we need to be sort of taking that data and actually interpreting it from an effects perspective. So actually beginning to look at the data and say, well, yeah, do those concentrations matter? And there are ways to do that. And I think that's on the analytical side. On the ecology side, people might have heard of eDNA. So rather than going out and doing invertebrate monitoring using traditional approaches, you can now go out and you can use DNA to characterize the communities. So we have some very powerful tools to I think, monitor and manage the environment. We have ways, I think, that it's getting better and better as chemicals get developed, to actually design those in a more environmentally friendly way, so that we're not actually producing chemicals that are harmful to the environment. And I think, if we sort of take all of this together, along with sort of management and treatment, we can begin to bring these levels down.
Fine. And you mentioned effects. We should be monitoring the substances which have effects, but we don't really know that much about the effects, do we? I mean, microplastics is around here for some time. We were discussing that last year as well.
Yeah.
We can detect them, although we don't have really the standardized methods. Or did we in the last year?
For microplastics, it's getting better.
I mean, the analytical part of it.
The analytical part is getting better. I would say that from a academic research point of view, we do have some quite sort of good ways of looking at the effects of chemicals. Again, they aren't getting embedded into regulation and assessment. So the way that chemicals are tested, the tests that we use are the same as when I started 25, 30 years ago. So again, the research doesn't really sort of get translated into policy and regulation, and I think that that is a problem. I mean, a classic example, I talked about the behavioural effects. So we know that antidepressants affect fish behaviour, so they affect how female and male fish interact. Now that's really important. So if you have an antidepressant in the river and that's affecting the interaction of the fish, that will affect the population of the fish, and ultimately it could cause decline in the population. But at the moment, behaviour isn't included in the assessment of risk.
Yep. So in the microplastics, for example, we don't really know that much the medical effects yet, unless there's something new in the last year. And I see Eugen Benedict somewhere there saying no. Okay, he will be on a panel tomorrow. Not necessarily about that. Thank you very much. And I would like now to go to the higher level of policy making and welcome Uroš Weigl, the State Secretary from the Ministry of, we have those long names, don't we? Environment, Climate, Energy, which is not directly responsible for water, I mean not for water supply, but has a lot to do with water through climate change, doesn't it? What are the current problems and how are you on the policy level trying to solve it in Slovenia?
Indeed, I speak on behalf of a ministry not directly responsible for water, but integrally connected to it through issues such as climate, as you mentioned, but also energy, air quality, soil policies. And looking at it from our perspective, I think that we see even more that water in itself is not a standalone issue. It's what is happening with water is an effect of cumulative pressure that comes from how we manage natural resources, how we manage land, how we build resilience, how we curb greenhouse gas emissions as the trigger of climate change. And with climate change, water is connected both ways, as many have mentioned. We most often mention the fact that through water we see the effects of climate change very vividly, and climate change is probably the key stress multiplier for water. We've seen this in Slovenia through the floods that have been mentioned many times, but also we see it through droughts. 8 of the 10 biggest drought years that have happened since 1980 are in this decade. So we see from all of these trends that how fast water-related risks are escalating due to climate change. But we also have to recognize the importance of water in combating climate change. Rivers, wetlands, lakes, aquifers are natural climate regulators. They provide the opportunity to store water, to retain water, and therefore help to buffer floods. They sustain ecosystems, all tools that we need to be effective in the battle for climate change. But nevertheless, in order to do their job best, these waters have to be of good or the best possible quality, which is important both for surface waters as well as, of course, for groundwaters as a source of drinking water. But in order to tackle this, because as I said, water is not an isolated challenge. We can only combat this through an integral manner, and this integral manner is continuing with what used to be called the green transition, what is now more often called the clean transition, but basically looking at all aspects of how this society and how our economies work in order to reach a status that is more sustainable in all regards. And looking at it from the perspective of our ministry, I can say even in the past 3 years that throughout even this time, it seems that we've had an increase of skepticism, of misinformation, and even populism as regards of this clean transition or pursuing sustainability. We've been accused even in political discussions in Parliament of clean transition being an ideology which causes more burdens than it does create good. And it's up to us to do a better job of explaining that all of this is not a burden, but rather the opposite. As was said in the introduction, we're not doing this for the planet per se. The planet will go on fine without us. We need to pursue a clean transition and to sustainably manage waters within this in order to safeguard really our own interest as regards health, but also interests as regard protection of property, protection of through the losses that happen because of extreme weather, climate-related extreme weather events. I think there's two ways of two important tools that we have to tackle this. The first being the strengthening of institutions' data knowledge. We organized just a couple of months ago, not very far from here, the first ever meeting of Southeast European environment and climate ministers, along with directors of hydrometeorological organizations. The idea of this is to really highlight their role in providing the data so we can create policy, but on the other hand also providing the data to the public in order for them to better understand the pressures and effects of environmental change. So we need institutions' data. We need tools like the State of the Environment report that is regularly published, for instance, in our country. We need this to become even a stronger public instrument, not solely a shelf document. So institutions and data, and the second is more integrated policies across sectors. As the graph before had shown, water, or maybe even saying in general terms, water resilience is not a water issue. It demands coordination in agriculture, energy, nature conservation, spatial planning, etc. In some parts in the country, we have more of an integrated approach. Speaking on behalf of my ministry, I would say in climate mitigation, this is the case. We have national strategy and then a national energy and climate plan, which brings together policy measures from all areas. But in the field of adaptation, I think we're lacking this framework. So we've started the process of creating a new climate adaptation strategy, and we hope that the climate law, which we will hopefully pass quite soon, will establish the basis for more action in climate adaptation. An important focus there must also be on local communities that we are also trying to support with more knowledge and know-how. One thing I would stress here is also EU level action on this, on supporting this integrated approach. So the EU adaptation strategy, water resilience strategy. This EU level documents or guidance is important because it harnesses the knowledge at the EU level, but then on the other hand, it forces us to create synergies between each other, to learn from each other, and also to tackle cross-border challenges which might otherwise be omitted.
Yeah.
So I think in the long term, I think, well, just to say, we must protect climate and environmental action from being pushed off of the political agenda. Number one. Number two, we build trust in institutions, data, and processes, especially as we face growing populism. And thirdly, we always have to be reminded, events like this remind us that water is a thread that connects climate, people, economy, and building water resilience is not an option. It's an investment in peace, in safety, and a shared responsibility.
Thank you. You actually opened quite a lot of interesting issues. Cross-border cooperation is obvious. I mean, the environment doesn't really stop at the border. And science denial is certainly a problem not only in environment and climate change, but also in other fields like medicine. In Slovenia, we are proud of being, green, water-rich, clean water sources and all that. But then when it comes to climate change, we had one of the largest increases of average temperature in Europe. Did you try to get the answer why that happened to Slovenia, and did you try to explain that to the population?
Yeah, we did. We started annual press conferences at the Environment Agency, and I have to say that they were they've been very well attended, especially the first one after the floods. But also, I think this year's in January, February, there was also the attendance there was also good, and I think media coverage was good. But still, I think what is missing is connecting the dots. So people do recognize that there is climate change is happening, but to understand that it is a collection of small actions that all together are actually at the root cause of this. And in Slovenia, I think we have a lot of effect that people on a declaratory level will believe in something and promote this, But then when it comes to facing certain restrictions that might be connected with this, it's more difficult to cross the line on this. I think people do not, but what I stressed is, I think people do not, I think one issue we have to press more is not the fact that we've had a big increase of temperature, but the fact that this big increase of temperature is connected with mounting environmental pressures, which create floods, extreme weather events, costs of adapting to climate change, etc. Not the temperature itself, but the costs that are connected with facing the subsequences.
Yeah, but denial of science is really based on ignoring a lot of facts. So when you try to fight that, I would not say that why not ignore a lot of facts, but why not try give a simple explanation what change in the environment, which people can see, directly contributed to floods 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago.
Yeah. I think we are trying, but I think it's also it's a matter of all institutions promoting this narrative, and then I think it will slowly. People will understand and feel and be motivated by it even more. We do try. If we have a new TikTok, our ministry has for the first time a TikTok for about 1 month ago that's trying to do this, to present these environmental issues in a more simpler manner. So we're doing our best, but I also have to recognize also the role of the president in this is very very positive. She, for instance, doesn't miss a chance to promote climate change and climate as a challenge, and also climate action as a necessity. If the government has to do a good job to do this, but I think all institutions and events like this, and I think all together, I think that we will manage. Misinformation, on the other hand, is a problem because to a large extent, a lot of it is also orchestrated, and that's why the last informal ministers meeting, there's only 2 a year in the EU. The last one had misinformation as one of 3 points on its agenda. Basically, what we learned is that we have a network of PR people in every country, and that misinformation needs to be put as a regular point on their agenda, and they also have to find a way of coping with it also together.
Right. One final question, and I understand that you will have to leave early. The regulation. Do you feel that Slovenia, as, let's say, advanced and small country, has to push the European regulation, or has to adapt to European regulation in this field?
I think we should push it.
We should, or what are we doing? I mean,
I think in many fields we are. There is also the question that you have to pick your battles. You cannot just promote everything. You also don't have
very specific. So we are pushing that on the European level.
On many issues.
Ideas are basically better or earlier, and we are pushing.
On many issues we are, but we are pushing it out of an important reason, and that is, if something is regulated at an EU level, that means that when you prepare this regulation, you use the knowledge of all member states and of EU level. It's probably better regulation that you make there. And the second is, it creates an equal level playing field. If we try to regulate things by ourselves, you always encounter, well, why do we have to do this, but in Austria they don't? That's something that you hear many times through especially from business or for Chamber of Commerce. If you do it on an EU level, it's easier. I think many ministries of environment, climate, therefore, use this chance that it's better to try to push for things ahead. I can go.
Don't, because we don't have that much.
Okay, don't.
You will not hear the answers from the EU level, people who have the influence on EU level regulation, but they will be asked about that. And if we can connect now to Czech Republic, Is that possible?
Just to say thank you very much and to apologize. Since I had to leave it when it was originally intended to end, I will use the chance now because I think we will go a bit longer. Thank you.
If we can connect to Ladislav Feigl now in Czech Republic, if the technology doesn't allow that immediately, we can... It does? Right, because the issue of European regulation and either adapting or pushing it, I think is also pertinent for the Czech Republic and the water management there.
Thank you for your question. Your Excellency, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for the opportunity to be part of this discussion. For your question, I would say that we are trying to influence the European legislation by our work at the councils, working parties. It was mentioned that today the European Water Resilience Strategy will be adopted, and Czech Republic sent its comments and its position on the water resilience, which we view as an essential part of adaptation to climate change, which is the topic of this discussion. I would make also a short technical comment at the beginning of my intervention. As the Czech Water Director, I represent the Ministry of Agriculture, not the Ministry of Environment. Climate change is already having a major impact on water management. The hydrological extremes are becoming more frequent, and it's safe to say that the era of water abundance is over. Our task now is to ensure resilient water systems that reliably supply water and protect citizens and ecosystems. Globally, we face both quantity and quality challenges. Droughts, floods, and unpredictable rainfall are pushing existing infrastructure to its limits. Meanwhile, pollution from industrial, agricultural, and municipal sources continue to degrade water quality. A particularly urgent concern is the rise of emerging contaminants such as pharmaceuticals, PFAS, microplastics, which are still largely unregulated and hard to remove with conventional treatment. In order to ensure resilience of water sector, it is necessary to work with climate change scenarios and incorporate them into long-term planning and related decision-making on water management infrastructure. Integrated river basin management planning is also indispensable. Resilient water management infrastructure is a key pillar for ensuring water resilience. Existing infrastructure must not only be regularly maintained and renewed, but also significantly upgraded to meet current and future challenges arising not only from climate change. A crucial element is also the integration of existing water sources into comprehensive water management systems at both the national and transboundary level. This will enhance the security of water supply for the population, industry, and agriculture, and allow for more flexible management during droughts and floods. Ensuring water resilience requires a synergy between technical and nature-based solutions. Together, these approaches enhance the efficiency and sustainability of water management, which is a key to adapting to climate change and protecting water resources for future generations. A healthy landscape plays a crucial role in retaining water in the soil, slowing runoff and improving water quality. But let's be clear, resilient water management is not possible without robust infrastructure. Water reservoirs are indispensable for ensuring adequate water quantity and quality for public water supply, industry, agriculture, and other human activities, as well as for managing hydrological extremes and maintaining river flows. The future of water management lies in synergy, not in choosing between gray and green, but in intelligently integrating both. Only then we can address the complex pressures threatening our most vital resources.
Thank you. You are very well in line with the State Secretary from Slovenia said. And here I would like to ask, are there any solutions implemented in Czech Republic which you think are underused on the European or in other countries?
Well, I think what I just mentioned, the synergy between the technical and nature-based solutions, is one thing that we are rather missing because nature-based solutions, let's say, are more favored at the European level, in our opinion, and water resilience simply cannot ignore the fact that the synergy between the technical and nature-based solution is necessary. You cannot just pick one or another. Both must be supportive, and that's something that we at the Ministry of Agriculture and in the Czech Republic are advocating, both at the national and European level.
It happens within the governments that it's difficult to coordinate between various ministries. Do you feel that problem being at the Ministry of Agriculture and having another 4 or 5 ministries probably responsible for around the same area integrally?
Well, in the Czech Republic, we have a very special situation because water management is, let's say, under several ministries, mainly the Ministry of Agriculture and Ministry of Environment. There are also other ministries such as Ministry of Defense and Health and Transportation that has also their competencies in water management, but the main, competencies are between the Ministry of Agriculture and between Ministry of Environment. The divisions are set by the legislation, but sometimes, and it's very important to coordinate our positions in order to have proper and resilient water management in the Czech Republic.
Thank you. So intersectoral and international cooperation. Wonderful. Mr. Martin Grambo, you had a lot of experience in this field. What do you think we are missing now when formulating the policies?
Yeah, thank you very much. I think the most important word was said by Anthony about the nexus. So I think we have to think, and you record also of that, we think we have to think and make our strategy over the borders of the sectors, and by the way, over the borders of the countries as well. It's everything true you said about chemical pressure and what so on, but in reality the picture is a little bit darker, unfortunately, because we do not only have these changes in chemicals, in emissions, but we have much more changes in our ecosystem. See, I was 20 years long Bavarian water director, and we spoke about that in the with the other directors, and I'm since more than 20 years member in the International Experts of Earth System Preservation in the European Academy of Science and Arts, and we have a phenomenon in this time of climate change, and this phenomenon about water is, I think you know that with any degree more temperature, we have about 7% more water in the atmosphere. So it's clear that we have more floods for some reasons. But our main problem, besides the chemical pollution, are the droughts. And these droughts are coming nearer and nearer, not only worldwide. I see colleagues here from Saudi Arabia and drought-used regions, but these droughts are increasing all over the world, including Europe. And we were thinking about 20 years, what's the reason for that, what's happening there. And meanwhile, we think we know it. It seems to be the changes in land use. We're speaking about agriculture, we're speaking about urbanization, we're speaking about deforestation, and especially we speak about the soil and the problems of soil. And so if you want to speak about a nexus and a political nexus, it's about climate and water and soil and biological issues. For example, we know meanwhile, or we think to know, that especially the trees, the forests, they sometimes are people say they are water storages. No, they aren't. The soil under forests is quite poor normally. But forests, we think, meanwhile, can produce rain. They make the rain. We have cubic kilometers of water in the atmosphere increasing. But under some conditions, it don't fall down. It has to do with the 3 types of rain. We don't have time enough for that. But especially one type of rain is heavily introduced by the land use. And the land use has to do with the soil, has to do with the storage of water in the soil, in groundwater and in the soil. And this has to do with the animals, with the worms and with billions of other animals in the soil. And I think we will not come to a solution, to a model of our water cycle. Thank you that the EU's Commission is now speaking about water cycle without understanding of this nexus. And by the way, you have 2 basic equations in this world for the global energy equation and the water cycle equation. And in both, the evapotranspiration is the driving factor. The evapotranspiration is the cooling factor in the world, and if you want to understand the whole energy we produce with water power or whatever, is this energy used for cooling evaporation, so for coming up from the water, not only from the ocean as well from the land, and coming down. So the only cooling factor. And the evaporation, the water storage, is the driving factor in the supply of plants, and by the way, in the supply of human beings, of industry, of economy. And so we would recommend meanwhile that we have a wider look, a political nexus in between all things affecting the water cycle, and acting in the right way, because this is the only chance to reduce a little bit the bad effects of climate change. Paul Crutzen told this the Anthropocene. We are in the time of the Anthropocene, and we have political deal with the Anthropocene. That's our idea. And we put it in the Bavarian and German national water strategy. So our politician level adopted this, and we are on the way, but it's a long, long way left.
Thank you. You really provided the top level view, I would say now, that we are tackling different items with the legislation, but the basic level, the top level really is water cycle and energy balance in the world. So should we try looking at every legislation through the lens of how does it affect the water cycle? Do we do that analysis at all?
Yeah, we don't. So typically we don't. So, but I think we have to put the focus on that. And I think I'm very curious about the EU strategy. We had some talks with the Commission in the last years. But I think this would be a good idea to understand that. For example, you have the problem in the towns, heating up the towns. What do we need? The trees. Yeah, every tree has a cooling capacity of nearly 1 kilowatt per hour, and so I think at the end it's more working together than the different.
Yeah, and every tree actually affects the water cycle and the energy balance. I mean, evaporation is a thermodynamical process as well. And the increase of increase of water in the atmosphere has to have an effect somewhere eventually.
Of course, and so the role of the forest, for example, could be also flood prevention if they produce an early rain. The problem of the flash floods is that we wait too long, that the humid in the atmosphere is summation and then comes down at one point. So I think the forest policy and special forests which are able to work with that, and especially the hedges and others, the drainages. So most parts of the world are drained, and at the same point we make irrigation, and the irrigation is killing the nature because it's cannibalism. So the groundwater level goes down, and the nature loses their capacity to stabilize the hydro system. So we are on the way to understand that, but we are far away to have understood this completely. So I'm very happy that you in Bleed, people in Bleed and other places are thinking about that, because for me it's one of the needed keys to tackle the issues.
Thank you very much. I think you brought us to another level. And I will ask Mr. Ambassador, the Netherlands has had literally hundreds of years of experience in water management. By now, one would imagine that you would have come to all the solutions, but I suppose there are still challenges. What are they?
Yeah, we still have a couple, I think. But I would like to start by saying that I'm very pleased to be here. I have been a diplomat for 30 years, but before that I was trained as a civil engineer in Delft, and I specialized in water management. So events like these are for me always a little bit like coming home. And in the last 4 years we have done quite a couple of events together with the water envoy. This is Miškova here in Slovenia, and it was always very exciting. So I would like indeed to share a couple of practices from the Netherlands. Here you see a beautiful picture with a lot of water, and that is because the Netherlands is located in a delta region, and water is everywhere, lakes, rivers, and we have been threatened by floods for centuries, and we have been working very hard to protect ourselves. 60% of the country is prone to flooding, and 17% of the country is reclaimed from the sea. And already almost 1,000 years we have created water boards, which are the first democratic institutions in the Netherlands to involve all the stakeholders and to organize this water management. So in 1953, we had huge flooding in the south of the Netherlands, and the government decided that we really had to do something substantial, and we developed the Delta Works. And what you see here is the closure of the Eastern Schelde, and it is one of the crown jewels of the Delta Works. It's a 9-kilometer structure which seals off the Oosterschelde in case of a threat of flooding. And this only happens more or less once a year. So then it is closed because the water level rises 3 meters. And it is designed in such a way to withstand a flood that is statistically unlikely to occur more than once every 4,000 years. So that's the probability. And if we go to the next one. And what we see is that climate change is posing new threats. And this probability of once every 4,000 years is getting higher. And next to that, next to the extreme weather and the high water discharges in our rivers, we also have increasing dry periods during the summer. And we have a water quality problem because of agriculture, because of industries. So studies are showing that these problems in the Netherlands are only increasing, and we have to do something about it. So we have to be innovative, and we are looking for nature-inclusive solutions. And I give you a couple of examples. This is in the Nieuwe Waterweg, which is a river ending up in the ocean close to The Hague. And we have installed only a couple of years ago reef blocks. And they are the backbone of a living reef, blocks of around 3 meters long and each weigh 6 tons. And they resist high wave forces and create a rich underwater landscape. And now already, even though it has been installed only 2-3 years ago, we see a difference. Cleaner water and already increase of biodiversity. Next one is the scent motor. And in 2011, this peninsula was constructed near The Hague, and the idea of this artificial sand bank is that ocean currents, wind and waves are gradually spreading the sand along the coast and reinforcing our dunes. And it is done in such a way that it is helping to make the nature nicer for recreation purposes. It is increasing biodiversity. And for us, it's a way to build with nature, working together with water instead of against. Next one is room for the river, as we call it. This is the beautiful city of Nijmegen in the east. And what we have done here is we have lowered the levels of the floodplains and created water buffers, including increasing the depth of the side channels. So if there's peak water, if there's high water, the water can stay there for a while, and that is how we manage to avoid flooding. So we create room for the river, but also in such a way that the quality of life in that area for people living there, for recreation again, for biodiversity is increasing. I was there myself recently, and it's really a very beautiful area, very pleasant. And in 2021, we had severe flooding in Limburg, also because of too high water from the river. This is our king and queen who do an inspection there. And because of those floods, which were very serious, we started the Room for the River 2.0 program. So we are now very much extending this practice. This is an example in Rotterdam, my hometown, urban planning, where we created a water square. And usually the square is dry and it can be used for like a public space for recreation. It's used a lot by young people, by tourists. And when there's too much water, there are 3 basins which are filled, and the water automatically seeps into the ground. And in that way, it is helping for vegetation, for trees, and it's also avoiding the overloading of the sewage system. This is a wastewater system. What we are trying to do in the Netherlands more and more is to make it part of the circular economy and to use valuable sources from the wastewater. So we are developing and already implementing ways to take out, to recover raw materials like alginate and cellulose, and phosphates, and also biogas is produced for energy, and also struvite, which is a very essential component of fertilizer. And more and more wastewater systems in the Netherlands are now implementing this and further developing it. I'm almost at the end, and I will end with two very innovative systems which have been developed, because this is Aurea, and it won this year's Aquatech Innovation Award for wastewater cleaning. And it uses both biological activated carbon filtration, BACF, and ozone treatment to remove micropollutants from wastewater. And it's done in such a way that it's very effective. And a very last one is a very unclear picture, but this is the Great Bubble Barrier. And indeed, it's a system which plastics was already mentioned a couple of times, a huge problem in the oceans. Also, it starts in the rivers, of course. And we have installed this in a couple of places in Dutch rivers. It is a technology which is quite simple. Air is pumped through a perforated tube placed on the riverbed to create a curtain of bubbles. And the bubbles go up and direct plastics with it to the surface into a waste collection system. And it's very effective. And it does not obstruct wildlife or boats at the same time. So several have been placed in the Netherlands now, and it won last year the SDG Award Netherlands. So a prize winner. Well, thank you very much. These are just some examples of the Netherlands to show that we have sometimes too much water, sometimes too little, and sometimes it's too polluted. So challenges enough.
Thank you, Mr. Verboom. I will try not to be too challenging, because I know that as a diplomat you cannot be too critical to either European institutions or your own country. But I will ask you a question as an engineer. You said that the Delta Barrier was built to withstand the 4,000 years waters. Yet in Slovenia we've had the 100 years waters, how many times? 3 times in the last, 15 years? So 4,000 years water or 10,000 years waters are not something we cannot imagine. Now, let's say that they're built to withstand a 3-meter rise. What happens if there is 12-meter rise? How will you react? How would an engineer react?
Well, Yes. My engineering experience goes a little bit back. I even don't know with what probability designs are being made nowadays. But let me tell you, in 23, when there were the floods here in Slovenia, we were approached by the authorities to see whether there are some practices in the Netherlands which might be of use. And we are always very willing and happy to share the experiences in the Netherlands. So we even have subsidized programs. And from that moment, we started a very intensive exchange between Dutch and Slovenian experts. Many online meetings took place, and also a study tour last year by Slovenian experts went to the Netherlands to visit several sites and to be inspired about nature-based solutions. And I think now there is a trip in the planning from the Netherlands by experts to here to visit some challenging sites and to see what kind of ideas we can bring.
Thank you. So it's international cooperation in providing solutions, and let's hear about the international cooperation in providing the rules. Can we connect to Dagmar Bernd Kaljadikova in Brussels? Here we are. If you can hear us,
yes,
we can see you and we can hear you. So we had a lengthy discussion already about the needs for international cooperation and the question whether the EU legislation or regulation should be pushing the barriers and forcing the countries to go faster, or should it be adapting to what the countries are already doing?
Thank you very much. First of all, thank you for inviting me to the Bled Water Forum. It's the first time that I am participating here, and I am really happy to join you, although I'm really sorry that I cannot be there with you in presence, because you heard that the water resilience strategy is currently being debated by the Commission, and it should be published very soon. So that's the reason why I could not join you. I work in the international department, so I will address your question. But before I do so, I would like to say a few words about the water resilience strategy that is in fact focusing on the EU level, but also on the international level. So if we start with briefly highlighting why the European Commission has decided to go ahead with a water resilience strategy, I think that we heard many good arguments from different panelists, and it's agreed that we have a very robust water legislation in place in the EU, focusing particularly on water quality. It is still evolving, but it is really very robust. We are facing challenges with implementation and enforcement. Plus, we are more and more confronted with the impacts of climate change. And the climate change is really causing more droughts and floods, fires, forest fires, and more intense extremes. So there is really a need to start a very transformative action and start to build up really solutions at the EU level. The same applies in the world. We still have challenges with the access to drinking water, to sanitation, and of course challenges related to the impact of climate change. So this is highly relevant for both Europe and the world. So these are the main reasons why there was a decision to go ahead with the water resilience strategy, because we need to improve the implementation of our legislation, but we also have to look at new solutions and how we can boost resilience in Europe and beyond. You heard in the morning from Antonia Gotta that the strategy is focusing on the three main objectives. And number one is looking at the water cycle. And what do we mean by that? We need to really make sure that our ecosystems, both freshwater and terrestrial, they are healthy, so they can provide really functions that are needed for the entire society, and they can provide clean, fresh water for all the users. And here we will be looking not only at the blue water, but also at the green water. So looking also how we manage land, what kind of impact it has on our freshwater resources, and how we can improve it. So very much in line with the comments from another panelist, that we need to really look at this holistically. We need to make sure that our land management does not destroy our freshwater resources. We need to improve retaining capacity of our soils. We need to protect forests, wetlands, and floodplains. So here we would be looking really at both water quality and water quantity. The second objective of the water resilience strategy is to build a water smart economy. And here we are looking really at different sectors of the society, because without the joint action we will not be able to achieve that. And particularly the focus is on how we can promote water savings, how we can ensure water efficiency in different sectors, how we can promote more water reuse, recycling, and then, of course, sustainable solutions to increase water supply. And the third objective will be, of course, making sure that we have clean and affordable water for all, not forgetting the vulnerable population and marginalized groups. And this is also very much in line also with the SDG 2030 agenda. The way how we are going to implement or achieve the objectives, we will be looking at 5 main action areas. Firstly, focusing on the governance and implementation. So, as I mentioned, we have a robust legislation in place in Europe, but there is still need for improving its implementation and enforcement. So we will be looking into the ways how we can support our EU member states in achieving the full implementation of the water legislation. If there is a need for some further adjustments of the legislation, we will look into that as well. The second action area relates to investments and water resilient infrastructure. So this is extremely needed both in Europe and beyond. Digitalization is another area that will be addressed in the water resilience strategy. Research and innovation technologies, and of course, security and preparedness. For the international dimension of the strategy, let me highlight that we will be focusing particularly how we can accelerate 2030 agenda, particularly Sustainable Development Goal 6, in order to address the challenges that we have in place, that 2.2 billion people lack access to drinking water and more than 3.5 billion people don't have access to sanitation, and more population suffers water scarcity. So that will be our main goal. But at the same time, we will be looking at strengthening the global water governance. So here comes the reply to your question. Yes, the EU is going to be actively engaged in making sure that we have the right framework at the global level to make sure that we have sustainable and resilient water management. In this respect, we will be working with the UN entities and trying to establish regular intergovernmental meetings on water at the UN level. You probably heard about UN 2023 water conference that happened after 46 years from the previous one. So we very much hope that we will continue having regular meetings. We have 2 mandated conferences coming next year and in 2028, but we do not want to stop there. We want to continue, and we want to have really a forum where we can exchange best practices, challenges, and how we can improve water management at a global level. The second priority from our side at the international level will be transboundary water cooperation. And here I would like to express my great appreciation to the role that Slovenia plays in this field, because you are helping us a lot in making sure that we have more countries joining the UN Water Convention, and also to make sure that we are implementing transboundary water cooperation. Another priority that we will be pushing for is to make sure that we coordinate well different multilateral processes. And here I'm talking mainly about the Rio Conventions on climate change, on biodiversity and desertification, because we need to make sure that the goals and targets of different conventions are aligned and water is high on the agenda in these multilateral processes. We will be, of course, working with different partners and building coalitions in order to achieve these goals, and also to We will be reinforcing our bilateral and regional engagement with strategic partners. And finally, of course, through the Global Gateway strategy, we will be scaling up investments in the water sector and providing assistance to our partner countries. I would stop here. Thank you.
Very reassuring to hear that you're looking at the policies from the very top level of the water cycle. And from the discussion we had here about the obstacles on the way to get water for everyone, this would be one of the major ones to have a holistic view on that. And I heard a few times the words pushing in the context that you will be pushing, which I'm really happy to say. But now I have to ask, what do you see as the main obstacles to your push?
The main obstacle is we are all aware about the current geopolitical situation, which is not ideal, but this doesn't mean that we are not going to put on the table difficult subjects like transboundary water cooperation, water security, and making sure that everybody has access to drinking water and sanitation.
Than I expected. So we come to the final speaker, that is Anthony Agota, who had the privilege to address the assembly at the beginning.
Keep it short.
So no presentation, just question and answers. Really, you have also a unique perspective on the whole situation, being close to the EU and EU policies. I would like to ask you, is there consensus on the way where we should be going?
Consensus where and with the
Well, in EU for the beginning.
Well, I like to think that if you take if you put your nose on the glass and you look closely, and this is what some journalists in the Brussels bubbles do, they can see, differences and fights, and there's a hero and there's a villain and there's a winner and a loser every day. But if you take a few steps back and you look through your eyelashes and you see the whole of what we're doing in the EU, and of course I'll say this, but I honestly believe it. I'm very proud of where the EU is. In 2019, the EU took a very bold decision because normally, and these arguments, we only move when the others move. We cannot move alone, right? I think Slovenia has shown that actually you can show leadership even though you're not a huge country, and you move. And the EU took a step forward, not waiting for others in 2019. And here we are in 2025. We are a global trailblazer, and we're trying to implement our policies. We're trying to adapt and modernize our policies, being agile to the world situation. So I think in general, yes, there is a consensus. But of course, and this is also, I think, healthy and normal in any democracy. And the EU, if it's anything, it's one huge diverse democracy with 460 million people, 27 governments and parliaments, all of that part of it. Of course, there will be debates on, we agree on the analysis, we agree we should solve it, we don't necessarily agree on this comma or that number. That's normal. So I'm not worried about that. I think that's healthy.
Right. We have great mistrusts in the institutions in general in Slovenia, and I'm sure that this is similar in other countries as well. So I am curious how it came to the main approach of the EU is in fact based on science.
Based on science and the legitimacy of our citizens. Because frankly, without the Free Friday for Freedom Future Friday, oh my gosh, the FFF, Friday for Future marches, Greta Thunberg and all these young people, and we saw some representatives of the young generations. Without them, without David Attenborough, Sky, ABC, we started with the single plastics negotiations in 2019. We did it with the political speed of and I remember my former boss, Timmermans, you're in the European Parliament sitting next to me, from extreme left all the way to extreme right in the European Parliament, everyone said yes. And he looked at me and he said, remember this, because this doesn't happen very often. There was a political push. But and you mentioned this before, and I want to dip out on the science. First, we had greenwashing. Then you had something called green hushing. And now we're entering into a rail which one could call green gagging. And I remember people saying in arguments and debates, oh, you're a tree hugger, you're an ideologue. And I would say, well, listen, who is the ideologue? One who says, okay, let's look at the science. Science is not absolute, but it is the best thing we have. And it is a method that allows us to test our hypotheses, to check if they're wrong and progress. So it's constantly evolving. It's the best you have. And that ultimately in a democracy, the different trade-offs have to be made, because you have to do trade-offs. And just like freedom and equality, if I ask or anyone, do you like freedom? Yes. Do you like equality? Yes. But you cannot have freedom in absolutism, because then it will be absolute inequality. And you cannot have absolute equality, because you would have absolute unfreedom. So these trade-offs have to be made. They can only be made, I think, legitimately in a democracy. But science has to be that facts are stubborn things. And the moment we lose the shared truths, so we don't have to agree on solutions, but the moment we lose the shared truths, that's the moment that a democratic debate breaks down. So I think the only way to counter disinformation or misinformation is sometimes it's misinformation. Sometimes it's not deliberate or malicious. But let's not be naive. There are actors outside and within us who deliberately, for what kind of interest, business interests, state interests, are pushing narratives, not to convince you of one truth, but to confuse us all and to say, hey, I lied. Everyone lies. This is very dangerous. I look at my children. I think I'm hopeful because I think they're critical. They can think critically, so our education is important. But we have to make sure that we are not ashamed, that we're confident to put out, these are the facts that we know now. These are the policies we base on those facts, and then challenge it. But when there's a lie, call it out. Because the moment you do not call up lies, it repeats itself and suddenly it starts entering into our brain. If you allow me, the greatest myth and the greatest swindle of some political forces is, again, to tell you that if you do nothing, everything will be fine. And do you know Don Draper? Does anyone see Mad Men? It's a great series with John Hamm, and he's Don Draper, the protagonist, and he's trying to sell an advertisement, mostly men. And he says, gentlemen, he breaks the conversation. Gentlemen, do you know what advertisement is? He says, it's happiness. And you know what happiness is? It's the freedom of fear. It is the smell of a fresh new car. It is the billboard at the side of the road that says, everything you do is okay. You are okay. And it's a very potent message. This is what it says. But it's not okay. And the danger is, we don't want to present the facts in such a way that people despair, because the problems are so big. We're trying to connect everything here today, that people despair. Once you despair, you do nothing. I tell the businesses, I said, you got to freak out. You need to despair, because if you don't change your business model, you will end up with stranded assets. But I think to people, it's so important to say that there's hope, because we've got the skills. We have the technological solutions. We have money. It is there. What it requires is political courage to show, again, that if we move forward on a transition, we can have better jobs, we can have cleaner air, fresher water, better soils, better water, cooler cities. There's a positive proposition, and for our security as well. But we need that courage, and that's why it has to come from governments and policymakers, has to come from scientists, and has to come from you.